Hey everyone, my name's Kim. I am a senior wedding planner from Nudo. Nudo is a wedding planning and styling company based here in Melbourne. I'm also the founder of Anatomy of Flowers, which is a floristry company based here in Melbourne. And I'm going to be taking over Polka Dot Bride's Instagram today for some Q&As. So they popped up a story yesterday with a little box for you to pop some questions in. So if anyone has any questions, pop them in now, and I'm going to spend today answering some questions for you. Okay, so the first question we have here is, how do I start with styling a blank space? So this is a really good question. I would say the first place to start is to think about what you need as opposed to what you want at first. So obviously you want to make sure that tables, chairs, crockery, cutlery is all taken care of. So that's really important conversation to have with your venue and your caterer, so you can understand what they're supplying, so what you don't have to look after. So hopefully you have all of the necessities like the furniture, crockery, cutlery taken care of for you, and then that way you can focus on all the fun things, so all of the styling. And when it comes to styling, the best piece of advice that I could give someone would be pick a color palette and then pick a concept. So the reason why you would pick these two things is all of your design decisions will come back to your original decisions around color and a concept. So for example, a color palette could be white and green with touches of blush, and then a wedding concept would be chic, romantic, and minimal. So this color palette and this concept work really well together, and you can bring all of your design questions back to that really. So when you're talking to your florist, your color palette, when you're thinking about design options, chic, romantic, and minimal probably isn't going to get you a rustic barn welcome sign. Obviously those two things don't really go well together. So when you have a strong concept and a strong color palette, it's going to make it a lot easier to style a blank space and make everything look really cohesive. Do you have any quirky ideas for nameplate settings? I'd say nothing exceptionally quirky. I would say that people probably want to save money in this area, so they don't really do anything crazy. But I would actually, instead of going quirky, I would actually go down the route of something a little bit more thoughtful. So obviously, usually people agree to just buy a place card with their name on it. A nice thing to do is actually, instead of just having a place card with their name, actually putting their name on the menu, so the menu itself is custom. A lot of family members want to take menus home as keepsakes anyway, so the fact that their name is on it is really nice. And you can take it a step further by actually popping a special message to that person on it as well. So it can say the person's name, and then you can actually customize it with potentially a memory you've shared together, and then it's also their menu as well. And that way it's a really thoughtful, beautiful experience for the guest, still a little bit quirky and still cost effective. Best ideas for styling a reception that haven't been seen before? I would say probably, obviously with everything that's happening at the moment, we're going to see a really big rise in intimate weddings, which I'm really excited for, because I think the opportunity for styling smaller weddings is going to be something that is going to be completely unique and really exciting to watch the journey of. So potentially things like taking a really big space and breaking it up. So potentially you have a big warehouse space, like we're lucky enough to work with all the time at the wool mill. We have a big feasting hall downstairs. So, if we're talking guest numbers of 20 to 40 people, potentially dividing the space with really beautiful curtains or fabric, or even potentially colored perspex or something really different, just to have spaces, you have your ceremony in one space, then guests move through. With smaller numbers, obviously you have the luxury of being able to use one big space and actually guests move between. I think another thing that we're going to be seeing is, because intimate weddings are smaller, which generally focuses, tends to focus a little bit more on styling, probably more interior styling really coming into weddings. Obviously interiors is always something that wedding stylists look to for inspiration, but I think that that thread and that trend is going to come through really strong. So something that's really big in the interior design world at the moment is that really colorful kind of Scandi Danish design. Think those kind of like blob candles or like swirly candles in like pastels or neon, you know, with, yeah, colored perspex and, you know, all different like kind of like clashing designs and those cool like foam mirrors and all of that. I think that's going to actually come through into weddings. So really colorful tablescapes, really like different kind of like shapes and textures. So something to keep your eye on for sure. I mean, if it's not a trend, maybe I'll just have to make it one. How to style a rustic venue to look like an Italian style wedding. This is a very interesting question. I enjoyed a lot. So I think something that is really important to think about when considering like themed weddings is not to take the theme literally. So obviously if you're looking at an Italian style wedding, obviously we're not going to go out and buy Italian flags and have green, you know, white and red, you know, themed colors everywhere. Almost forgot the Italian flag there for a second. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is thinking about the concept instead of the theme. So what that means is instead of thinking, okay, what is Italian, think about how does Italy make me feel? So what do I want to bring from Italy and why is it important to me? So when I think of Italy, I think of a really beautiful long lunch on the Amalfi Coast, which is fresh and crisp and fun and vibrant and full of really beautiful colors and very rich. So all of those things start to build your color palette and build your concept. So a color palette to think about would be starting with something like fresh and crisp. So really beautiful crisp white, obviously, and then adding obviously like a really lush greens. And then when it comes to like the pops of colors, think of things like the bougainvillea in Italy. So like fuchsia. I think of like lemons, so yellow, and then potentially like the beautiful like porcelain pots, so that really beautiful like cobalt blue, again blended with white. So that's a good way to think about your colors. And then potentially like a beautiful tablescape would be bringing all of those elements in. So you could either do a timber table, obviously throwing back to the more rustic style venue, a timber table, or you can pop some white linen on. Then you have beautiful like blue and white vases, rambling fuchsia bougainvillea. Then you've got your lemons on the table. Immediately that feels a little bit more elevated than obviously like just the plain Italian colors of, you know, green, red and white. And another thing to think about is olive foliage. So olive foliage is something that you see all over Italy, and it also works really well in rustic style and like rustic themes and rustic concepts. So that's like a nice bridge between the two there. So you can bring some olive foliage into the day as well, and that's going to lend itself really nicely to rustic and really nicely to the Italian style wedding as well. Okay, next question. I can't decide between a cocktail or sit-down reception. Can you help? Absolutely. I would say a really, really important thing to think about when deciding between cocktail or sit-down is how you want you and your guests to feel on the night or on the day. A big difference between the two is that cocktail has probably more of a relaxed and casual feel. Obviously, your guests aren't bound by a seating chart, so they're mingling all night. And obviously another thing to think about is because they aren't assigned seats, generally there's not enough seats for everyone. So I know that some people with really family heavy weddings that have potentially a few people who would prefer to sit down might actually go the route of a sit down wedding instead of cocktail. And then obviously with a sit down or seated wedding, something to think about would be the fact that it is a little bit more traditional, and people are obviously bound by a seating chart, so you are choosing where people sit. A pro of this is that you can actually pop people together that you think will have a really good night together and have a lot of fun, especially if you do like potentially a shared dining menu where it's quite a collaborative experience where people have to pass plates and you know, it's a very family style evening. So I would say that both of them have really big pros. One isn't definitely like better than the other. I would really think about how you want to feel and how you want your guests to feel on the night. And I think that feeling of that gut feeling inside of you, like, yeah, I really want it to be quite casual and relaxed, or actually I want it to have a little bit more of a traditional feel, or a little bit more a little bit more structured, I think that will definitely tell you the route that you want to go down and what suits you best. Should I have a head table, or otherwise known as a bridal table? I would say this is actually quite a personal question because it really depends how you want your day to, again, to feel. I know I feel like I speak about this a lot, but I think people don't often think about how they want to feel on their wedding day or how they want to interact with their guests, and really every decision should be coming back to that and what you want your day to be like. So the pros of a bridal table is that you don't have anyone sitting opposite you, which means it's a really great photo opportunity. So, you know, you don't have guests opposite you getting in the way of a photographer taking your photo. So if photos are really important to you, I would say probably having a bridal table is the way to go. Alternately, if you want to, you know, break tradition and sit with your guests, I would say that that's probably becoming more and more common for people to do because they just want to be involved in the party. They don't want to be separate from their guests, which is absolutely understandable. And I think as bridal parties get bigger, obviously we're seeing bridal parties of 12, 14. It's hard to have a bridal table with numbers that big, so it's actually easy to seat them in with the guests. And you can do what I mentioned in another video about changing your bridal table, or sorry, your bridal party chairs. So if you do want to sit with your guests, but you still want to have a point of difference, either yourself and your partner could have different chairs, or all of your bridal party could have different chairs. So that way it's a nice point of difference between you and your guests, but you're still involved in the day. Okay, styling tips on a budget. Prop hire and flowers are so expensive. Look, I'm probably not the right person to ask because as a florist, I am a little bit biased to the fact that I think flowers are an extremely important part of your day, especially because they're the one thing that changes in a venue that sees a wedding 3-4 times a weekend. So flowers are the one thing that really bring your personality into the space, and you can do it really well and really effectively on a smaller budget. Think about things like bud vases. Instead of like running flowers down the entire center of the table, do individual bud vases that are a little bit more sparse, and that way you can pick a color that's maybe a little bit more impactful, so those bud vases still have a lot of impact in your styling. Also, big bridal parties really affect your flower costs, so if you can either try and keep your bridal party numbers down, or be creative about the way that you look at your bridal party flowers. So not all of your bridesmaids have to have a bouquet, for example. Some of your bridesmaids could have a wrist corsage instead. That's a really good way to bring down your flower costs. Unfortunately, the biggest part of flower cost is actually the florist's time, which is definitely worth every single penny. I think like I can personally say I'll 100% be handing the reins over to another florist, even on my own wedding as a professional florist, just because it's not worth the stress in the lead up to the wedding and the morning of the wedding. You know, could you imagine like instead of like being at home, getting ready, enjoying your morning, having a champagne, getting your hair and makeup done, you're literally like trying to build a floristry arbor or trying to make a bouquet, like, because obviously flowers are fresh, so they have to be done the morning of. So it's just an added stress you don't want to put on yourself, and definitely worth paying a florist for. And I know that it can add up, but just be creative with your florist and hire someone you trust, and make sure you work together to find something that fits in your budget but still fits in your style. And ultimately sometimes that does mean you have to compromise and you can't get everything you want or potentially the exact look that you're after, but your florist will be able to create something really, really beautiful for a budget that suits you. And it's just about having that conversation and having an open conversation with them. Okay, so the next question is, what is the most overlooked detail of a wedding reception? Actually, I'd probably say chairs, which I feel like is a little bit random, but because the venue or the caterer usually supply the chairs, people don't often think to change them. However, just a small change in the chairs can actually really change the space quite dramatically. For example, if they provide white chairs, changing them to black would really dramatically change the look of your reception. And also making sure that the furniture that the venue provides actually goes back with your wedding concept as well is really important. Another good way to think about potentially changing the chairs on a more cost-effective level would be just change the chairs at your bridal table. So you can keep all of your guests seated at the chairs that the venue provides, and actually just change the chairs at your bridal table or where your bridal party is sitting. especially because there's so many cool chairs these days. Like think about green velvet or like a rattan peacock chair. You can really change the space quite dramatically. Another good thing I would think about would be linen. I feel like linen is very undervalued. As you can imagine, if you have a space full of timber tables and then you change all of them to a soft blush linen or, you know, a dark linen, that really, really changes the space a lot. I think a big trend we're going to be seeing coming through this wedding season is patterned linen. So think like really cool, like gingham tablecloths. I'm all for that. What things do I need to budget for in my reception that are often forgotten? Supply meals. So you really want to make sure that you remember to feed the people that are working really hard for you behind the scenes to bring your day to life. It's definitely not an exorbitant cost by any means, but you want to make sure that your caterer is feeding people like your photographer, your videographer, your wedding coordinator, all of the people that are working really hard to actually bring the day to bring your day to life behind the scenes. Make sure that they have some food in their tummy so they can keep going and have energy for the rest of the night. I would say something else that you can think of is lighting. So it can be something as small as candles. So if you want something a little bit more cost effective, candles is a really great way to change the atmosphere of your reception. And I often find that when people don't do candles, they regret it, because when the lights start to dim in the reception, the space tends to feel a little bit more romantic when you've got candles. And I think obviously romance being such an important thread, you know, weddings are all about love. People really love having candles. So that's a really cost-effective way to change the lighting in your reception. Something a little bit more bougie would be actually a lighting installation. So potentially having a professional lighting company come in and rig some really cool lights up. So this can be anything from like a chandelier to actual lights on like specifically over the dance floor, like, you know, bouncing lights. You can kind of like wash your whole room in a certain color. Obviously that's a little bit more on the expensive end, but lighting is definitely something to think about when budgeting for your reception. Obviously something small like candles, or something a little bit more extreme like an installation. Okay, what's the main difference between alternate serve and family style menus? I think I answered this a little bit in my previous answer, sorry about that. So basically the main difference is alternate plated is you choose two options and they get served alternated down the table. So something you hear often in movies is like chicken or fish. So basically down the table, it's literally chicken, fish, chicken, fish, chicken, fish. And family style menus, which are often referred to as shared menus, are actually where they're plated down the center of the table. So all of your meats, vegetarian options, salads, sides, all plated down the center, and then people self-serve. So shared dining is something that's really on the rise in weddings. It does have a more collaborative feel, like I mentioned earlier. So you're really encouraging people to engage with the other people around them at the table, which we find that a lot of people really, really like the idea of. It does make a sit-down wedding feel a little bit more casual. So there's people who feel torn between having sit down but wanting it casual. A shared dining experience is a really popular option. Plus people generally feel like there's more food at shared dining because it kind of gets plated and people can, you know, put as much food as they want on the plate. I think it definitely depends which caterer you go with. I definitely think that it's pretty much the same amount of food, but both have their pros, and both are a really amazing experience. What is the best way to cover walls that aren't to your taste? A palette wall is not our style. Ooh, this is tricky because walls are something that are actually quite hard to cover, and if you actually are going to do it well, very expensive. I would say probably embrace it. Unfortunately, I know it's probably not what you want to hear, but you know, obviously one of the venues that we run is the Wool Mill, which is a very industrial style venue, and it does have a roller door on it. And a few people are like, oh, roller door, but at the end of the day, you're getting married in really cool renovated warehouse, and you know, people aren't going to think that is out of place there. So it actually does make sense to be there, and it just adds to the character and the style of the building as well. If you did want to cover it up though, or like a section of a wall, I would say something that I've done in the past is pop a hire item in front of it, a styling item. So you could potentially do a photo booth in front of it, which actually obviously usually is quite big and takes up a lot of space. Or you can do like a really cool flower installation. You can potentially bring a little bit of fabric into it as well, so it actually kind of covers a little bit more, and then it kind of turns it from like a plain boring wall that you don't want to see into a selfie destination for your guests. Best ideas for styling a reception that haven't been seen before. I would say probably, obviously with everything that's happening at the moment, we're going to see a really big rise in intimate weddings, which I'm really, really excited for, because I think the opportunity for styling smaller weddings is going to be something that is going to be completely unique and really, really exciting to watch the journey of. So potentially things like taking a really big space and breaking it up. So potentially you have like a big warehouse space, like we're lucky enough to work with all the time at the wool mill. We have a big feasting hall downstairs. So, you know, if we're talking guest numbers of like 20 to 40 people, you know, potentially like dividing the space with really beautiful curtains or fabric, or even like potentially like colored perspex or something like really, really different, just to have like spaces, like you have your ceremony in one space, then guests move through. With smaller numbers, obviously you have the luxury of being able to use one big space and actually guests move between. I think another thing that we're going to be seeing is, because intimate weddings are smaller, which generally focuses, you know, tends to focus a little bit more on styling, probably more like interior styling really coming into weddings. Obviously interiors is always something that wedding stylists look to for inspiration, but I think that that thread and that trend is going to come through really, really strong. So something that's really big in the interior design world at the moment is that really colorful kind of like Scandi Danish, you know, design. Think like those kind of like blob candles or like swirly candles in like pastels or neon, you know, with, yeah, colored perspex and, you know, all different like kind of like clashing designs and those cool like foam mirrors and all of that. I think that's going to actually come through into weddings. So really colorful tablescapes, really like different kind of like shapes and textures. So something to keep your eye on for sure. I mean, if it's not a trend, maybe I'll just have to make it one. Okay, we've made it. That's it. Thank you so much for watching the videos today. I hope you've managed to get something out of it. And if you actually have made it all the way to the end, first of all, congratulations, and I am very impressed. And I hope you've managed to take something away. I've had a lot of fun filming these Q&As for you. Just to finish off a little bit about Nudo, like I mentioned at the start of the video, we are a wedding planning and styling company based here in Melbourne. Available Australia-wide though, so if you want to get in touch with us for wedding planning or wedding styling, our Instagram handles in these videos. Otherwise, you can email us or go on our website, nudo.com.au. We also run two wedding venues in Melbourne. So we run the Wool Mill, which is a really beautiful modern industrial warehouse in Brunswick East. And we run Gather and Taylor, which is a really cool, chic, rustic warehouse in West Melbourne. So you can get in touch with Nudo in regards to either one of those venues, or you can get in touch with the venues themselves via their website. Thank you so much to Polka Bride for having me. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions about Nudo, feel free to slide into our DMs. It's usually me on the other end replying, or you might catch one of the other wedding planners. And I can't wait to hopefully chat to you all, and have a great rest of your day. See ya.